I am in a beautiful hotel room in Berlin with Dash. Basically, my world's dreams have come true. Dash, this is, I think, maybe one of the first interviews you've done.
This is my first. Well, it's my first interview as a League of Legends personality. Yeah.
What other interviews have you done before as a non-League of Legends personality?
As an actor, I've been an actor my entire life. So with certain roles, either newspaper, film, or even like DVD extra interviews, which are very interesting interviews.
DVD extra interviews are really interesting. How are they interesting?
Well, because one, they're super long, and they generally are done by somebody who was involved with the production, so they have a lot of insight already into like inside jokes. Yeah. So they can call things out, on that, and they're looking to poke holes into the filming process.
So you've actually been in films and stuff previously.
A couple, yeah.
And no one seems to have found these in the League of Legends community. I've been waiting for one of these to pop up on the League of Legends subreddit or something, but
I've been waiting for that as well, and I'm very happy to say that it hasn't happened yet.
All right. Do you have an IMDb?
Maybe.
Okay, so there we go. Here we go. In the comments of this interview, it'll happen. So anyway, since this is one of the first interviews you've done, I think it'd just be kind of nice to sort of get to know who you are as a person besides the guy yelling at people on the analyst desk.
Right.
When I guess I should say, when did you actually join Riot? Because I think people really got to know you this year.
Yeah, so I joined Riot, I guess at this point, a little over a year and a half ago. It was January of 2014. Okay. After a fairly long interview process that took months and months and months.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I joined as an esports coordinator. So originally the plan was, I'd made it very clear to them I wanted to be a shoutcaster, and that was one of my goals. Yeah. But I didn't have any casting credit to my name. I had acting training, and then I wasn't a pro player. So as far as they were concerned, what did I know about the game? One. Two, was I going to be able to be a broadcaster, which is a different set of skills than acting in general. So they said, I'll tell you what, we'll bring you on as an esports coordinator. We'll put you on the special projects team under Chancellor, Riot Chancellor. And I worked with him as well as many other people on the team, Bridget in player management, Nick Allen on a couple League Ops things, and I just kind of got my feet wet at Riot. Over the next 6 months, they kind of sussed out my game knowledge, my ability to work with a team, and to a degree my drive and how committed I was to this game and our broadcast. And through that 6 months, arrived at the conclusion that yes, it is something I can do. I started working with the rest of the guys, taking acting classes, improv classes, and doing practice casts. I was doing rehearsals before LCS days for weeks on end before I ever ended up on air. And then week 7 last summer, they just said, here you go, it's a super week.
Yeah. Now, you said you wanted to join and become a shoutcaster. We don't really see you doing much shoutcasting, so what's happened there?
Okay, well, so, sorry, much to my chagrin, I guess, not really though. It's a big inside joke with the team is that I'm a host, not a shoutcaster. Hosting is actually what I would prefer to be doing, mostly because to some degree I see myself returning to the acting profession at some point in my life, and the skills that I'm learning doing what I'm doing currently are much more transferable. As from a host to acting, or from a host to a news anchor, or even another network, than casting a very specific game. The set of skills that are required are slightly different. One requires intense game knowledge about one game. The other requires the ability to interact with other people. Not that they don't know how to do that, but to interact with other people, to control a conversation, understand flow, and some larger production aspects. So for me, this is actually my ideal role, is working as a host.
So wait, are you originally from like the LA, Hollywood area?
I grew up in San Diego, so close by, 2 hours south, and definitely am a West Coast kid born and raised, which is why I returned after attending school in New York.
Okay. So then how did you go from like, I'm going to be an actor, to doing all this like crazy esports stuff?
It's really, well, it's kind of random. I've been a gamer my whole life. I've loved video games and played them somewhat. I was somewhat of a closet gamer when I was in high school. I was on the track team and trying to run and get through high school as everybody else does without too much social ineptitude. And then I went to Tisch, School of the Arts at NYU, and I was studying acting out there. A year after I had graduated, I was living and working in New York. That's when I did those films that I told you about, as well as a couple off-Broadway shows. And as every other actor does, you bartend or serve tables in the meantime in between jobs. And a woman came into my bar every Wednesday, and I became friends with her. About 6 months later, she went out and got a job at Riot. Flew to California. I decided I wanted to move out there around the same time. Moved out there, hit her up on email. She took me to the Season 3 World Championships, which was amazing. I got to interface with a bunch of people and talk to recruiting coordinators at Riot. And ultimately, through that process, I was reached out to yet again for, is this a company you'd like to work for? If so, what would you like to do? And they kind of left it up to me to let them know what I was interested in.
Now, you are not just a host for the LCS. You are also part of a show that I think some of my younger siblings watch called All Chat.
Yes.
What is it like balancing sort of the esports side of things with also doing that show, which is more for the broader and perhaps younger audience?
Well, I would say it's probably not as bad as most people think in terms of a time commitment. Right now, All Chat is on a 2-week cadence, meaning we only film every other week, and we do film the whole show in a single day. Now, there's a lot of other prep that goes into it, deciding what pieces of art we're going to to showcase and who the guest is going to be, and prepping for the interview. But for the most part, all of that is very doable with hour or two meetings here and there throughout the week. I think the biggest struggle of it all is, well, there's two things. One is staying in touch with everything that is relevant in both areas, because, and you can attest to this, as an esports personality and a lover of esports, you have to spend a lot of time staying on top of what's relevant, reading articles, figuring out what people want to know, what rosters are changing, how's this patch, get all these storylines that you need to have in your head so that when you interview someone or I interview somebody, we know where to poke and prod. On the flip side, I need to know, all right, a new champion's coming out, so I need to figure out what all the people are thinking about from a lore perspective. Where do they want to see this champion go artistically? When a new game mode comes out, same thing. When we're going to interview somebody, I need to do a ton of research myself on their past, their history, so that I can go in and interview them about art. I was never a super artistically inclined person in that sense. And so learning vocabulary for that show was very difficult. I needed to be able to look at a piece of art and say more than like, oh, it's pretty, oh, it's really cool, learning about shadowing and perspective and contrast, all these things that I could then present the pieces in an effective manner.
Is there any time where it's like, because you're kind of a different personality in both these, though I would really love to see you be like, no, Josh, that is not an acceptable answer. I want to know why you think that this piece of fan art is fantastic. Yeah. But is there any aspect of, because it's definitely two different versions of Dash, right?
So that's the second thing. The second thing is balancing the personalities of the two of them, because the feeling of the show is different, right? The goals of an esports broadcast are to be a little bit, at least in my opinion, for me, the desk is to be a little bit more buttoned up, professional, analyze something to a degree, be able to fall away from that and joke and banter occasionally, but we have a very clear goal there. On the other side, we have this show that is for the players or by the players of League of Legends. It's not really about, me, Josh, Mel, Jimmy, who's been added to the show, or saying, any of these people. It's about showcasing the art and seeing how it affects us, talking about common issues for any League of Legends player when it comes to toxicity or comes to, new champions and ranked etiquette. And so, given the fact that the shows are trying to do two different things, it definitely is a struggle for me to, I think initially when I started working on All Chat, I was still a little bit too here's my response to this, show. And I've evolved there. And funnily enough, I think it's helped me on the analyst desk, because a lot of the criticism I got when I first started as a host for the LCS was that I was too stiff. Yeah, come on, know your audience. This is, anyone from, 15 to, mid-late 30s watching this show, and they're gamers. They want to have fun, right? This is the culture that you're what is the word? Yeah, exactly. And so in that sense, both have helped me, but it is definitely a challenge to sometimes remind myself that, you can let go a little bit more here, and over here you got to tighten things up.
Well, we only have a little bit more time for a couple more questions, but two really big things I want to ask you is just sort of talking about, I recall a time maybe at the start of this year where I remember seeing you on PTL, and it might have been like Freak or Jet or somebody that was like talking, and then you were just kind of standing there stoically, and then like it would be your turn to talk on the teleprompter, and you'd like say your words, and you just go back to being very stoic.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking of that specifically at Worlds when I saw you've become such like a dynamic host and really pulling a lot of stuff out of the people that you're talking to, and really forcing pretty serious conversations while still having a good time. What do you think has really allowed you to see so much like progression and getting comfortable on the analyst desk and really becoming like the world's host that we've seen now?
Yeah, well, so it's funny that you mentioned that because I think it was Atlas who coined the phrase Lego Man, because it looked like I was standing like a Lego man during that show. And that is like honestly one of my most embarrassing moments, like looking back. Where that came from is actually in acting training, you learn to establish a neutral, meaning you should be comfortable exposing yourself, having essentially perfect posture and your arms at your side, and be comfortable that way. And so I am comfortable that way. So it didn't feel weird to me that entire time until about halfway through, my producer comes in my ears. He goes, do something with your hands. Do anything. But to your point about loosening up and evolving, I think a lot of it was owning the desk. Actually having a sense of ownership. It's my space, not to sound too selfish, but that is my space, and that I should be 100% confident in that space, that I own it and can direct the flow of conversation. And as you build that confidence, you can allow yourself to build a looser structure of the way you want things to go, and then have more wiggle room within that structure. When I first started, during every game, I would say, okay, this is the first question I want to ask, and I'm going to ask it to Zyrene, and then here's the second question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to go to Freak, and if Freak doesn't answer it this way, then I don't know how I'm going to get back to, right? And I had this very clear idea, and within that very small structure, if it worked, it worked, but if someone tried to force me out of it, it was very hard for me to go there. Now I have a much looser structure, and we can go, I can establish a through line that I think I want to hit, and then if someone derails that, I'm happy to go with them and say, all right, I'll get us back eventually. And so a lot of that is building up your confidence and ownership of the desk, a greater understanding of the game, and practice. Yeah. Honestly, it's like you can attest to this. How many times have you been in front of a camera now? Yeah. And every single time it just gets easier. Yeah. You become less aware of the presence of the camera, and you become less aware, too, of like this sense of life or death thing that you get when you are in front of people.
Everything I say right now is like being seen. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I could be crucified when I walk out of this. It's like, no, come on. Right. Like we're all human. I've messed up a million times, and more than half of them have never been noticed. Yeah. Right. And when you realize that as well, it unlocks you quite a bit.
The other thing I do want to ask you about is, for whatever reason, the community does a very interesting job of like always making these comparisons between people in the same role. So like for me, it was like Thorne started doing interviews, and there was always conversation about like Thorne asked better questions than Travis or whatever. And then Doa even talked about this recently, where there were like Doa appreciation threads, and he was getting very frustrated by the like, oh, all the other casters are, like people will criticize all the other casters, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. For you, there's one other version of you that exists in this, and that's Shox, who's been around for a while. And so obviously, like I'll still see that conversation occur where it's like, well, we've got Dash, well, we've got Shox. Shox is pretty and whatever, and people sometimes just unfortunately go on her appearance.
Got the hair.
Yeah. So what do you think of your existence alongside Shox? Is that like a partnership? Is there like an NAEU rivalry? Like what's that like?
Oh, it is 100% a partnership. Now it is a more recent one than I think people would expect. When I first started, there was little to no communication between us, not for any specific reason, just more for a lack of doing it than anything. And it was just this year that I was talking to some of my producers and people within Riot about, hey, to a certain degree, I'm struggling with how to improve. Yeah. That same idea of how do I self-improve, because everybody else in the NA office has someone they can go to, right? Freak and Zyrene can go, and Jat and Kobe and Riv, they can all go and talk to each other. And I can source them for criticism, but there's no one else except for Shox who does what I do. And so we have recently begun, Skype sessions with each other just to go over past shows. Maybe if I have a specific segment in mind, or I was like, that was so difficult for some reason, and I'm not really sure why, we can watch it together. I can source her for those opinions. Unfortunately, no, I can't fuel the fires of any NAE rivalry between the two of us. I think that There's 1.5 million things I can learn from her, and I think just the same the other way around. We are very, very different hosts. That is for sure. A lot of what we were talking about, me loosening up, was looking at Shocks and saying, what does she do that I don't? Because she seems to have such an easy time interacting with people on her desk, regardless of who they are. Right? I get comfortable with the guys that I work with every week, but then you put a player on there, and I'm a little more tiptoey around, oh, how do I work with this person? With her, it's so much more easy and carefree. Yeah. So I've been trying to take a lot of lessons from her there. I think on the other side, we've worked with like prep. That's a lot of it too. It's like, how do you prep? And we're looking in the future for more opportunities, and I can't say exactly what, of how to get her and I to work with each other more and have more opportunity to ping off of each other. But it's definitely a blossoming working relationship.
Is there anything that you would like to say, especially in light of all the praise and like Dash is so handsome, all that stuff that we've been seeing recently in the community, you'd like to say?
Well, I think the big thing is just a thank you. Something that I don't have the opportunity to say very often is that I appreciate the amount of time that I've been given to grow. I think that's very important for anybody in a new line of work, and one that is in the spotlight. It can be sometimes very scary. So having a community that has been relatively supportive throughout my entire journey, I appreciate that, and I hope to continue to impress you and grow for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the interview. Really a pleasure to sit down and sort of get an idea of where you came from, where you're going, etc. So thanks so much. Looking forward to seeing you on the desk finals just a couple days from now.
Pleasure's mine.
For everyone else, you can check out the rest of our coverage of all things Worlds at GameSpot.com/LOL.